Hey guys, welcome back to the Becoming series, exploring the deep truths and the principles that will enable you become everything you were created to be and to do. So, deep waters, deep deep waters. Now, when we talk about being in deep waters, what do we typically mean? Typically mean that we're in a whole lot of trouble. So financially, for instance, I'm in deep waters means that you're in debt of so much, or you don't have enough cash to cover the things that you need to buy all of that. If you're in deep waters emotionally, you typically mean that you're feeling a whole myriad of emotions that threaten to bury you. Psychologically, deep waters means that your mental stability is being threatened. So, being in deep waters is not um, typically what we refer to as a pleasant circumstance, right? But I like to take the opposite view, not discounting what it stands for, but really trying to shed more light, or trying to be a bit more revelatory about what I think it means to be in deep waters. And I related to this scripture that's in the Bible. I think you'll find it in the book of Luke. And it was when Jesus first met Simon Peter, right? And if you recall the story, Simon Peter, later called Peter, and his guys, his brother James and John, etc., had been out all night fishing or trying to catch fish, and they had caught exactly nada, not a one. And these were actually professional fishermen. They were not amateurs. They were not people just trying to start a hobby. It was actually their livelihood. So they were pros. It was something that they had been doing from the time they were quite young. So as pros, they would have known the ins and outs of fishing. But they caught nothing, nothing at all. And morning comes and they go to shore and they're about to call it a day, right? And here comes this guy saying, God again, I will come with you. He not only says God again, he now adds, go out into the deep waters. And when I read that recently, I'd read it several times before. It really didn't get me because, I was familiar with the story. But I read it again recently and it just struck me. He said into the deep waters, which is really the place where we don't want to be most of the time, all the time. Nobody wants to be in financially deep waters, or emotional deep waters, or psychological deep waters. We want to be, want to be cool, want to be calm, want to be in a place where things don't threaten our stability, right? But Jesus says the opposite. He says, go out into the deep waters. And what happens? They caught a truckload of fish, possibly the best catch ever. So, what am I saying? Deep waters um, relates to being in deep trouble or in deep problems, right? Situations, like I said, that we want to avoid at all costs. But I think that it is in those deep waters that you actually find the thing that saves you, that you actually find the solution. So, for instance, if you're in debt, financially deep waters, what is trying to it's trying to actually teach you a message. First of all, that is showing you that you haven't been a very good manager of financial resources. But if you take a more critical look, you'll actually begin to discover more things. So, for instance, I've been in that position before where, debt was a huge problem, believe me. But what did it do? It actually made me start thinking, right? And realizing that I couldn't cater to all my financial issues by just relying on a single stream of income. It also led me to dig deeper into my true giftings, my true talents, right? Which is really what led me to start doing the things that I'm doing today, teaching and speaking and writing, etc. Um, but if I hadn't gone through that, it most likely wouldn't have led me onto this path, because I would have continued trying to be comfortable, and all that, trying to be hunky dory. But this situation really just upset the apple cart, and it forced me to start looking inward. So being in deep waters is not really a bad thing if you have the right perspective. if you're looking at it through the right lens, it forces you to look inwards. It forces you to look within yourself, where the thing that's supposed to happen, the thing that's supposed to break you through, is really waiting for you to discover it, right? And when you read in the Bible, for instance, there are lots of references to deep. So, for instance, you read in Genesis that darkness was upon the face of the deep. That was at the beginning, the beginning of creation, right? And deep, that word deep, it's a deep word, but it contains so much, because that is really where things are birthed, right? That's where things are birthed. Yes, there might be trouble. Yes, there might be problems. Yes, it might seem that everything is dark and dank and dreary, but that's where things are birthed. When a seed is planted into the ground, it is covered, right? And it's dark. Everywhere is dark. It's dank. It's dreary. But what happens? What happens after a few days? Life begins. Life begins. So being night is not necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes God does his best work in the dark. When you're in deep waters, that is the time not to be frightened. Although frightened, being frightened can be a state of default for most of us. But that is really the time to take a deep breath and look inwards, because it's telling you something. It's telling you something that, if you can leverage, would lead to your best life yet. So take deep waters not as a punishment, but as a learning tool that you can use to become